It happened on a cold January night. I remember it clearly because the wind outside was howling like a wolf, and I had just finished mopping the kitchen floor. My back ached, my knees creaked, and my hands were raw from washing dishes without gloves. Still, I smiled when I saw my granddaughter's school shoes sitting by the door. I'd polished them earlier so she'd look neat for school tomorrow. But just as I sat down to rest my bones, I heard loud footsteps coming down the stairs. "Why is the heater on this high again?" my daughter Megan shouted from the hallway. "Do you know how expensive electricity is?" I opened my mouth to speak, but she didn't wait for an answer. She marched into the living room, turned the heater down, and then turned toward me with a cold look in her eyes. "This ain't no nursing home, Mom," she said, her voice sharp like broken glass. "If you can't pay rent this month, then get the hell out." Then she slammed the door so hard the picture frames on the wall rattled. I didn't say a word. I just sat there. My heart felt heavy like a sack of wet laundry. I looked around the room. Photos of us filled the shelves, smiling faces from birthdays, holidays, and Christmas mornings long ago. But they felt like lies now. Those happy days were gone. I stood up slowly and walked to my room. Or should I say, the basement. That's where they moved me after Megan turned my guest room into a fancy space for her Airbnb business. She said the guest experience mattered more than me being upstairs. I didn't complain. I never did. The basement was cold and smelled like dust. My bed was small and my things were shoved into boxes labeled mom stuff. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wall. No pictures, no warmth, just peeling paint and silence. I thought about the day I moved in here. I had fallen in the shower in my old condo, hurt my hip badly. Megan said, "Come stay with us, Mom. We'll take care of you." I sold my place and gave her the money to help with her mortgage. I thought it would be nice to live close to family again. I didn't know that close meant being their cleaner, cook, and free babysitter. Every morning, I woke up early to make breakfast for her and the kids. I packed school lunches, folded laundry, cleaned the bathroom, and made dinner. Megan said I was just helping out, but she never said thank you, not once. Then the rules started. No family pictures in the living room. They make the place look less modern. Stay in your room during dinner parties. It's awkward when guests don't know who you are. Don't bake anymore. Your cooking smells linger too long in the house. Little by little, I became invisible. Just someone who didn't belong. I thought back to when Megan was a little girl. She had pneumonia when she was 7. I stayed up for nights with cold cloths and prayers, not sleeping for days. I remember skipping meals just so she could go on a school trip to Washington. And now, she couldn't even let me use the heater without snapping? I wiped a tear off my cheek. I wasn't angry. I was tired. Tired of being talked down to. Tired of being used. Tired of feeling like I didn't matter. And something inside me shifted. I stood up and walked over to the small wooden box I kept in the bottom drawer of my dresser. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside was an old yellow envelope. I pulled it out with trembling hands. It was the deed to the house, still in my name. When Megan needed help buying this place, she had bad credit. She begged me to co-sign, and I did. I even paid the down payment. We both knew it, but she had chosen to forget, and I had let her. But now, as I held that paper, something woke up inside me. Not anger, not revenge, just truth. A truth I had buried for too long. I sat on the bed with the envelope in my lap. The house may have changed, but the truth hadn't. This was still my home, and I still had a voice I hadn't used in years. I looked around the basement room one more time. I thought of my late husband, Earl. He'd always say, "Dignity, Ruth. Never let anyone take your dignity." I closed my eyes and whispered, "You were right, Earl. I lost it, but I'm going to get it back." I got up, straightened my back as best I could, and walked upstairs, quietly. Megan was watching TV, her feet on the couch, eating the dinner I cooked. I didn't say a word, just walked past her and into the front room. I stood there for a moment, looking at the smiling photos on the shelves. Me, Earl, our 3 kids when they were young. We were so happy once. Poor, but happy. Then I turned and went back to my basement room. Tomorrow, I would go see Mr. Jenkins, my old lawyer. It was time to remember who I was. A mother, a woman, a human being. And this story, my story, was just beginning. I woke up early the next morning before anyone else in the house. The floorboards creaked under my feet as I moved slowly. I didn't want to wake the children, not because Megan asked me to be quiet, but because I still loved those little ones, even if their mama had forgotten where she came from. I wore my best blue sweater, the one Earl always said brought out my smile. I put the house deed in my purse and made myself a cup of weak coffee, then stepped outside into the cold. The wind hit my face like a slap, but I didn't care. I walked to the bus stop with my cane and my small black purse clutched tight in my hands. It had been years since I'd visited Mr. Jenkins, my lawyer. His office smelled the same: old wood, coffee, and something warm like leather books and long memories. When he saw me, his eyes widened. He said, "Ruth, it's been too long." I smiled and said, "Charles, I need to do something important, something that should have been done a long time ago." He offered me a seat, and I placed the envelope on his desk. His eyebrows rose. He said, "This is the original house deed." I said, "Yes, I never signed it over. Megan didn't qualify for the mortgage on her own, so I co-signed. I gave her the down payment, but she treats me like garbage now, Charles, like I don't matter, like I'm just furniture." He looked at me kindly, but I saw sadness in his eyes. I said, "I want to transfer the house, not to her, to David." Charles nodded slowly. "Your son in Kansas?" I nodded. "He calls me every week. He sends me little gifts. He asks me how my knees feel and tells me about his kids. He still sees me." Charles didn't say anything for a moment. Then he opened his drawer, pulled out the proper papers, and handed me a pen. My hand shook a little, but I signed. When it was done, he placed everything in a folder and looked me in the eyes. He said, "You're doing the right thing." I didn't answer. I just stood, hugged him, and whispered, "Thank you." On the way home, the bus was crowded. A little boy sat next to me, holding a toy car. He smiled at me and offered it to me to play. I smiled back and thought, if only people stayed kind as they grew older. When I got back to the house, Megan was in the kitchen, pouring herself orange juice. She looked up and said, "Where have you been?" I said, "Out." She rolled her eyes. "Can you pick up Jada from dance class this evening? I'm meeting someone for drinks." "Sure," I said. But inside, I knew something had changed. I wasn't saying yes because I had to. I was saying it because I chose to, and that was different. That evening, I made meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Jada said, "Grandma, you make the best food ever." I smiled and kissed her forehead. It reminded me of when Megan used to say the same thing, long ago, before she started chasing money, praise from strangers online, and a perfect-looking house. The days went by quietly, but Megan started to notice something wasn't right. I wasn't moving the way I used to, not cleaning as fast, not folding the laundry before she even asked. I was slower, quieter, but I was watching. She called me into the kitchen one evening. She had her arms folded. "Mom," she said, "have you been messing around with mail? There's a notice here from the county about property tax. My name's not even on it. Why would that come to you?" I took a deep breath and looked her in the eye. "Because the house is still in my name," I said. Her eyes went wide. "What? You never qualified for the loan on your own. I paid the down payment. I co-signed everything. You were supposed to add your name when things got better, but you never did. You didn't even ask. You just acted like I was a guest in my own home." Her face turned red. "That's not true. This is my house. I pay the bills." I didn't argue. I just walked past her and went downstairs. The next morning, I heard her stomping around the living room. Then she came charging down the basement stairs. "Where's the deed, Mom?" she barked. "I gave it to someone who sees me," I said quietly. "What does that mean?" "It means David owns the house now." Silence. "What? You gave my house to David? You can't do that. That's theft." "No," I said, standing up slowly. "This house was mine. You told me if I couldn't pay rent, I should leave. So I did. I left the house to someone who won't throw me away." She stared at me with her mouth open. "You betrayed me," she whispered. "No," I said, "you betrayed me. You turned me into a ghost in a home I helped you build. You told me I was unwanted, useless, but I remember who I am now." She stormed back upstairs. I heard her slamming things, yelling into the phone. I knew who she was calling. The police. When they arrived that evening, 2 officers knocked politely and asked to speak with me. I showed them the deed transfer papers. They checked the signatures. One officer even called Mr. Jenkins. After 20 minutes, they looked at Megan and said calmly, "Ma'am, your mother was well within her rights. This house was hers. She had full legal ownership. What she did was legal." Megan started crying then. Real crying, not the kind with anger, the kind with shame. But I didn't gloat. I just looked at her and said, "I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it to protect myself." She didn't answer. She just ran upstairs and slammed the door. Again. But this time, something in me didn't break. It healed. Later that night, I called David. "Mom?" he answered, his voice warm. "Would you come visit me this weekend?" I asked. "I'll be there Friday morning." The Friday morning David arrived, the sun shone brighter than it had in weeks. I sat on the front steps with a warm blanket on my lap, sipping tea and waiting. When his old blue truck pulled up, I felt something deep in my chest, the kind of peace you feel when someone truly sees you. He jumped out and rushed over. "Mama," he said, wrapping me in a big, strong hug. "You okay?" I smiled, holding him tight. "I am now, baby." He helped me inside, took off his boots, and looked around the house like it was something precious. Megan didn't come down at first. She stayed in her room for hours. Maybe out of anger, maybe out of shame. I didn't know. I didn't ask. David sat with me in the kitchen and listened as I told him everything. The nights I went to bed hungry, the dinners I wasn't allowed to join, the time she asked me to remove my wedding photo because it ruined the Airbnb vibe. He didn't interrupt. He just held my hand and let me talk. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Mama, we're gonna fix this house.
Not just the walls and paint, the soul of it. I blinked. What do you mean? I mean, we're going to turn this place into something better. Something for folks like you. Folks who gave their whole life and ended up forgotten. You don't deserve to feel invisible. No one does. He had tears in his eyes when he said it, and I did too. That night, we sat on the living room floor with paper and pens and started planning. We called it the Olive Chapel, named after my favorite tree and what it stood for: peace, healing, and starting over. We would make the house a space for women like me, widows, elders, those pushed to the corners of life, those who needed love and a place to be heard. The next few weeks were busy. David brought in painters, cleaned out the Airbnb junk, and took down the cold, empty decorations. We hung up old family photos again, real ones, full of love and life. We added soft blankets, books, warm lights, and even a piano. One by one, people started coming. Women from the neighborhood. One had been staying with her daughter after surgery and said she felt like a stranger in her own family's home. Another had lost her husband and hadn't spoken to anyone in months. They came in for tea, for stories, for hugs, and for warmth. We weren't a business. We weren't even a group. We were just family. The kind that sees you. The kind that listens. As for Megan, she came downstairs one day while I was knitting on the porch. She stood quietly, not saying anything. Her face was pale. Her eyes had bags under them. She looked small, not in size, but in spirit. She said finally, "I didn't know. I mean, I didn't see. I was so busy trying to build my life that I forgot who helped me build it in the first place." I looked at her. "You didn't forget. You just thought I'd never say no. You thought I'd always be quiet." She lowered her head. "I'm sorry, Mama." I nodded. "I forgive you. But I can't go back to being a ghost." She looked around at the new space. Softer, warmer, fuller. "I miss how it used to feel," she whispered. I placed my hand on hers. "Then help us build something better. Not for you. Not for me. For all of us." And she did. Slowly. She started joining us for tea, helping with painting, listening to the women who came through our door. Her voice changed. Her eyes softened. One morning, little Jada ran in and hugged me so hard I nearly fell over. "Grandma," she giggled, "my teacher says you're famous. She saw your story online." I laughed. "Oh, really?"
Turns out, David had written a short post about my journey, about the Olive Chapel, about how one act of remembering who you are can change everything. It was shared by hundreds, thousands of people. Strangers sent letters. Churches asked how they could help. Even city workers came by with warm blankets and books to donate. All I ever wanted was to feel seen. And now, I didn't just feel seen, I felt needed again. Not for chores, not for money, but for my heart, my stories, my wisdom. One night, I sat alone in the living room with a cup of chamomile tea. David had gone back to Kansas, but promised to return monthly. Megan was upstairs, reading to her kids. The house was quiet, but not empty. I looked up at the wall. There was a new photo now. Me, Earl, all three of our kids, and our grandbabies around me, smiling. Real smiles. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Earl. I remembered who I am." This house used to feel like a prison. Now it felt like a home. Not because of the paint or the furniture, but because love had returned, truth had returned, and so had I. I was never just an old lady who needed a place to stay. I was the builder of this home, the keeper of its fire, the mother, the wife, the warrior in silence. And now I was the voice in the walls, the light in the hallway, the warmth in the tea, the song in the room. I was Ruth. I remembered, and now the world did too.